creepy. I actually hope that doesn't happen. I don't want to see less people working.
Well, there is a TV show already on called Deep Fake Neighbor War, or Deep Fake Neighbor Wars, because I guess it is a plural show title. Because that's a show, and they're like, let's use deep fakes to make them celebrities. And I'm like, is this legal? Like, is this? I don't think this is legal. I think this is explicitly using like someone's image for your own. Wait, what's happening? But there you go. It's on
That's
there.
an episode of Black Mirror. Did you see that episode of Black Mirror?
I mean, everything feels like it's an episode of Black Mirror. Like I'm thinking of like the thing where you have your statuses and your points, and I'm like, that's it. What is that? 10 years into the future? And you can control your kids by blocking them from seeing certain stuff. That's like, 5 years into the future. Everything
that's
feels
now.
Oh gosh. Yeah. It's all pretty messy.
It's a new world. It's a very new world. I'm going to introduce you. I might have to include a lot of that because that's interesting. We talk about it a lot, but I'm going to introduce you. For people who don't know, this is Monia. She's a friend of the show. She comes on a lot. We usually speak on Twitter, but recently Monia has been kicked off of Twitter twice. And so this is how I speak to her now. Monia, what happened? You got kicked off of Twitter again.
Yeah. And the thing is, it sounds so, everyone is like, what did you do? What did you do? And I'm like, I did not do anything. It tells me that apparently I've been trying to evade suspension with this account, as if this is like a new puppet that I'm like, oh, I just got banned. Now I'm back. And I'm like, no, I came to this account when my previous account was hacked, which I came to you about, by the way. And you determined that no, we can't say anything about this is not yours. Seems legit. I'm like, really? Legend of Zelda crypto scamming. That sounds legit. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Yeah, they haven't answered, and it's been over a month. So I'm like, I guess I gotta just redirect where I spend time and stuff.
Twitter is
you're definitely one of the people that I've missed seeing online, because I do miss people from Twitter that I'm like, oh yeah, you're just like, interesting views. Although it's a bit calmer without it.
It really is. Twitter is a cesspool, and I go there just to see what's happening. And I'm watching the algorithm get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So, but then I noticed I hadn't seen anything from you in a while. And you usually upload all of, your articles, and you have conversations with people. And I kind of like spy on you, and I stalk you in your conversations, because that's what Twitter is supposed to be.
Yes, I think so.
But then I hadn't seen you in a month, and I was like, what is going on? And I messaged you, and they said, oh, she's off again.
We've gotten rid of this person. Yeah. And it is really a good thing that I'm not that paranoid, because I could definitely spin out into a place of like, they're coming for me. Like, but no, I'm sure it's just incompetence.
It's just incompetence.
A lot of things that are called malice are just incompetence.
Yeah.
It's sad.
I've been reading some of your articles, and I think the most interesting ones I've been reading have to do with attachment.
Yeah.
So you are, just to get everyone caught up, you are a fan, a former fan, now an anti-fan. You're an apostate.
Yeah, I consider myself a former stan, an ex-stan, and fan. Is still fine. That's still fine for me. I still think that's a useful label for just enjoying and liking things. I really do differentiate between stan and fan. But yeah, stan is the little bit of cultier side of fandom. Yeah.
You wrote in The Revenge of the Stans, your article, The Revenge of the Stans, that they're only like 1% of fans are actually stans.
Yeah.
So the Bayhive.
At least as far as they're being targeted. Like, they know that they're targeting that small of a percentage, because it sort of works along with the is it the 80-20 principle of like 20% of the work is done, or like 20% of people make 80% of the work and 80% like just consume it. And with the internet, it becomes like even smaller percentages, and the 1% are the ones that are like running the accounts, the fashion accounts, running the photo accounts and the update accounts. One of the things though is I think there's a very large underestimation of the ages of these people. It's a lot of grown-ups, you know, and you're one always assumes it's just like, you know, these teens that are raging. But no, there's a lot of grown-ups that find themselves in these communities.
When you say grown up, you mean like 20s, 30s,
Yeah.
40s?
Like 25 and above.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you think they do it to get away from their regular lives? Or do you think they do it because it gives them some kind of power to be a stan and run the account?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have a big account within fandom, you will receive I think it's called charisma by proxy, when there's like a leader, and then the ones that are just like the closest in command still receive some of that charisma too, and they have like a sheen to them as well. And that's what ends up happening because they're a connection. I think it's fulfilling to some degree because they get to, you know, get goodies, and they get to go to secret concerts or meet and greets. And they get to feel important because all of these industry papers are like, hey, let's talk to the people that are doing all the marketing. Wow, you have 200,000 followers. Amazing. It's like they get to sort of, yeah, they're taking a bit of space. In a way that I think is being exploited, really. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's fulfilling, you know.
Yeah. I was listening to something really interesting about petty tyrants this morning. Ooh. And the people who run the homeowners association boards are often like these little mini dictators.
Yeah.
Have you encountered that in fandom at all? Just these petty tyrants, mini dictators? You may have, but how common is it?
It's very common. I have said before that I think it depends on what fandom you are, whether the really bad ones have sort of risen to the top of the fan pyramid and, you know, like have a lot of influence. But some fandoms are worse than others. I can, for example, mention Fall Out Boy that I was super into in the emo days, and I still like their music, so I'll follow along a bit of their things. And at some point I saw fans, you know, laying down the law about an alternate universe of fan fiction that was built off of a universe that Fall Out Boy created, but now it's like an official canon, and you have to follow the canon rules. And I'm like, no, you don't. This is fan fiction. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you guys have you have a group within fandom that is now policing the canon of fanon. Like, no. And that's definitely what I would consider very petty. Yeah, it's very strange. That's not even you know, people getting alienated and exiled. That's just a strange exerting control. Trip. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exerting control. Yes.
Because I wonder if Fall Out Boy cares at all.
No.
They would not care.
No.
Of course not.
No. I don't think they have as much of an awareness of what happens in fandom at this point either, because they're definitely one of those bands that can rely more on casual fans. Yeah.
They seem to be healthier to have casual fans because they'll spend money on concert tickets and whatever else, and they're not going to ruin your name online.
Well, you never know. But it's also, you just need, I think that's the problem too, is you just need those dedicated few, and then that's enough to sort of really derail. Like a single person can really cause a lot of damage. I know there's one of the things that I'm still like, I'm not sure how to write about it, but there was from my time in One Direction fandom, there was a time that someone showed up that was like, oh, I'm a publicist, and someone else in the fandom was like, who is this I don't believe that this is a publicist. I'm gonna find out who they are, and was like, went down to like find out who they were, found out the company, like called them, tried to get this person fired, because it turns out that this person was actually, you know, I mean, they were using a pseudonym, but they were actually a publicist. And we have all these messages, like screenshots, and I'm like, okay, yeah, so you just decided, no, I'm the one who has, you know, minimal experience in this area. I need to be the one and only. Power trips. It's all power trips, really.
Oh, yeah. That's fantastic. It's terrible for the people involved, but like, as far as a story goes, as a personality that would do this, that, you know, if they ever got elected to Congress or something, they would be a complete disaster, that same personality type.
Yeah.
But they go for smaller and smaller, like school boards or HOA associations or fandoms. Oh, it's such a good story. No, it's obviously terrible for them too.
Yeah. No, I think it's just because we've exoticized, I don't even think that's a word, but like we've made all of these abusive situations so foreign to us that we don't even recognize the groups that we exist in and how some of those patterns repeat. And yet it's always a favorite of TV shows, you know, the little neighborhood that has all those dark secrets because they have to stay on their toes and not, you know, not be too friendly with their neighbors and all of that. That's a big theme, those neighborhood associations.
Yeah, you don't want to piss off Mrs. Salt.
No.
There's the original homeowners association from like, I did this video of like, she was like in 1929 and she just ruined this entire small town in New York by being a petty tyrant within the church. And when she died, everybody realized that they didn't like any of the things she liked. And it's just, they were just like, wow, we were, you know, we were under the spell, under the power of this petty tyrant, Mrs. Salt, this little old woman.
That sounds like, yeah, I mean, that just shows, I feel like it's people will just go along with things, or like it's easier than to like have to confront anything. Like, okay, well, I guess we're doing this now. Yeah. It's not healthy.
Yeah, we talked about parasocial relationships. Excuse me if I'm looking this way. This is actually where you are to me, so I'm looking directly at you. If that doesn't look like I'm looking directly at you, I actually am. So it's easier for me than to not look at you.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
So we talked about parasocial relationships and how people who are just online, they find people and they have this sort of, they have a relationship with them. Can you explain that real quick before I go into these questions?
Yeah, so the parasocial relationship is what develops between someone who is basically sort of interpreting someone else's behavior and actions and, you know, building a character in their minds that is associated with this, you know, what they're seeing. And it sort of takes shape in your, you know, your little mind, your imaginary social world. It's a bit of a clunky term, so I'm trying to think of something better, but yeah. And then you can start, you know, just using that avatar for, you know, you grooming those, like getting those feelings, you know, really intense. And it's not a conscious thing. It's really like your own brain will trick you into that. Yeah,
we fall in love with characters all the time. And I guess it's just that now we have influencers who are characters, kind of.
Yes. Yeah, basically.
Even if they don't want to be, even if they're trying to be themselves, there has to be a character.
Yeah, I think it becomes a character as soon as they get the feedback, because they're never doing it in a vacuum, right? They would still be themselves if they were just doing that stuff. But then once you start to get the feedback, I mean, it's these forces that just push against each other. And that's also why I think parasocial relationships, I mean, they exist. It's not something that we can, you know, eradicate. Or even need to, but we need to be careful when we have like really strong reactions to something. And that's partially what I was writing the attachment stuff about. Yeah, what are those questions?
Well, you go on to attachment theory and how that really has changed your view about parasocial relationships. Can you explain attachment theory real quick to the viewers?
Yeah, attachment theory usually refers to how you learn to relate to other people when you're young, and sort of looking at the family unit and how your mom and your dad parent you, and then how you develop your own style of interacting with people. That's also why things like once a cheater, always a cheater are terms, because you'll be like, okay, they'll find themselves in the same dynamic, and then, you know, oops, something happened, because your brain is making you do things that are not good for you, but your brain is telling you like, this is what's exciting, this is where I should be going. And that's if you have an unhealthy attachment dynamic. So there's a bunch of different types, and there are books on a lot of that. There's like love avoidant. There's you can be disorganized, which is like one of the bad ones, or it's also where you would find the codependence, really, the people that just can't let go. That's definitely a type of attachment as well.
You mentioned codependence. You mentioned codependence with Louis Tomlinson.
Yeah.
That he has a codependent relationship with his fans.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I don't know exactly who that is. I know all of my music through Dance Fit. And
nice.
So I only know the Dance Fit instructors.
Yeah. Those are your parasocial icons.
Yeah. No, I do. They're YouTube fitness instructors, and that's how I know everything. And then I have to go watch the video to see where they got what they're trying to do. But I know. I'm just this person. I'm just like, I couldn't care less.
Sounds great. Yeah. You don't have to know. You don't have to know who people are.
Is it relevant to the story? Can you like explain why he has a codependent relationship with his fandom?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly because he's one of the One Direction alumni. So they already had that type of fan. They were definitely essential in creating. I know people say like don't like the word grooming, but like it's relevant even in business terms of like getting a user base used to something, and sort of lobbying with them for exchanging things and stuff like that. And we know that from their leaked Sony slides, marketing slides, where it's like it's the relationships that matter. Like you have to, like, the fans want to know more. It's not necessarily the music. And then once the band split, all of the characters, each of them, got a really intense fan base. And he in particular had a very a lot of problems that were not necessarily out of his own doing, but that created this more intense fan base that would work harder and sort of try to show that they were there. And that's why and I called it codependent because he called it codependent, really. So I'm not projecting. He basically said that he has a codependent relationship with fans because he said he does what he does to go live and play. And I think he knows that fans put in a lot of money and time to do the job that his label should be doing. But I don't know that it's a worthy, I don't know if that is a worthy investment. Not even, I don't want to, that's the type of thing that I don't want to put on people. But there was a New York Times article where a therapist was talking about how being a Swiftie was like amazing and it's worth all the pain and all of that stuff. And I was like, this is terrifying. This is terrifying that a therapist would be like going along with it and probably getting caught up herself, which happens. But like, oh no, now we're just promoting this level of intense attachment. There's no other way of putting it. And it's an attachment that can never be conceived because it is by default I want to say diagonal, but I know that's not the right word. It's skewed. It's not an even.
Of course.
Yeah
She can never get back to all her fans, the Swifties. And you wrote about how they all got mad at her for dating this guy. And I'm not a stan, although I couldn't help but read it in the Twitter feed because it just kept coming up.
Oh, yes.
So I couldn't really go into why they hated this guy so much. It was just like, oh, Taylor Swift screwed up. And more so than screwing up her own life, which she seems to do a lot. She seems to have screwed up her relationship with her fans completely. Or not completely. I don't know. You tell me.
No, I think
Taylor Swift.
I think she has, I mean, for me, this is not even the beginning. This was nothing in the scale of Swiftie freakouts to me. What was telling was how many people who normally stay out of those types of situations and like gossip, like how many more people got involved, even if it was just to say, like, why do they care? Like, people started commenting on this, but there's been worse situations. Like, think of the Kanye Kim phone call about how, oh, I'm singing about you. Is that okay? And then they have like her on on the phone, consenting to it, basically. And some of her fans were like, no, that's a voice actor. Like, she would never. Like, this is clearly staged, you know, because they can't accept. That's where it goes in. They can't accept a deviation from this image of them that they've created, that they've sacrificed so much for. And we can all do that in our own heads, which is what is.
Well, I suppose that's normally in
challenging.
any kind of friendship, you have an idea of the person that might not be the person entirely, but you have, you know, this, you wouldn't be friends with someone you didn't have a good opinion of. So you have a better opinion, probably give them the benefit of the doubt on everything. So how different are these fan attachments to celebrities than, let's say, a regular friendship?
Well, I mean, part of the problem is the way that you're interacting with them. Like, by default, if you're that focused, you've probably experienced some sort of revelation, so to speak, and are in awe when you're looking at that person. Preferably, I don't think you're in awe with your friends. I mean, you might be like, wow, you're so talented, and feel awe at looking at their amazing works or something like that. But when you're interacting with them, you're not like constantly nervous because there's like a superhuman thing that you've built up. I mean, I've gotten to, I mean, because I work in the entertainment, I've run across celebrities now and then, and there are some people that you get a reaction to, even if you don't think of yourself as a fan. Like, you will get like a weird sort of kind of nervousness. And I think that's really what differentiates those relationships from friendships.
So this is like the coolest dude in high school.
Yeah.
Or the coolest girl in high school, except over the phone.
Yeah.
So instead of seeing them in the hallway and being like, oh my God, you're such a good runner, you're such a good quarterback, we see it over the phone. Yeah. We all know their name. They don't know our name necessarily.
Yeah.
And so it's very unhealthy attachment.
Yeah.
It's unrequited, entirely.
Yeah, it's unrequited, completely unrequited. And there is yeah, now I'm blanking on what it's called, but there is a term for that as well. Limerence. Yeah, limerence is for that state of intense love, and they've sort of, I mean, these are not theories that have fully been researched. You can't say like as a fact, but what they've noticed that there are some people that prefer those stages, that stage of anticipation. And then once it becomes real and is like normal, it becomes boring. And I can definitely see myself in that sometimes. So you want that excitement, and that leads you to go deeper into something that's like not great for you.
No, it's not good for you at all. It's supposed to be boring. People are human. Yeah. So, you know, once that all wears off, you still have a person there. Yeah. I'm sure that person wants to connect with people as well. Yeah. It's so funny because, you know, the Buddhist term attachment. Mm-hmm. So that's
it's like a worldly attachment.
Yeah, worldly attachments. You can't move on because you have either really good attachment to this world or a terrible attachment to this world, but you can't just accept that a thing was a thing in the moment and then move on from that. Yeah. So you get stuck. You get stuck in this world, and that's, according to Buddhism, it's not a good thing.
I feel like that fully applies to the current state of like online world, because I feel like we're in like the perpetual present. So I'm like, I like this term, perpetual present, because you can I see this on Tumblr a lot because it is a fandom hub primarily. You will see older things recycled. You'll see moments of like, oh yeah, this is that time where, you know, he didn't know how to whisk. This is that time she fell off the stone, and this is the time they saw each other again. And you can just relive those moments as if they're happening still. And you can really hold on to like past nostalgia, like it's like you're living it, because you would normally just consume it via computer anyway. So what's the difference? You know,
it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, I have my happy place. Like,
yeah,
some of my happy places like Star Trek: The Next Generation. Mm-hmm. Or I was having a really rough year. I was like 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. Everything just seemed to be falling apart, and it was because the world was kind of falling apart. And maybe it was 2016.
It's been ongoing. Yeah. It's been ongoing.
So I go to my happy place. And I know I've seen every episode. I've seen every episode like 10 times, but it's just like, okay, it's my happy place.
Yeah. I mean, there's shows and like comfort movies and shows are so good for that, for sure. Yeah.
That's fascinating how quickly it's changing our minds too.
Yeah.
I
I
feel go on.
Yeah. No, I feel like it's affecting us more. I was listening to this therapist's podcast, and she was saying something about how I hate that I'm blanking on this right now, but it was all about how we're so affected by things and we can't see it, so we're seeking this validation instead of challenging. And that made me think of the Stan article. The therapist was telling the New York Times, like, yeah, let's lean into it. Like, lean into their dysfunction. And I'm just like, yeah, this seems to be a problem.
I don't think this is a good therapist. I think this is a very bad therapist.
No. Although, to be fair, well, no, she's not being a good therapist to that particular patient, at least. Because that's just
you can't. There's nothing coming back from that. You're putting all your energy into a thing that can't help you. You're better off putting your energy into a regular relationship with a friend or even a hobby. Now, if this person is either be a Swiftie or become addicted to drugs, like if this is her coping mechanism for a major drug addiction, okay, fine, maybe it's being a good therapist.
Yeah. But I mean, it keeps you away from, it keeps you away from dark alleyways for sure. So that's a positive, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you actually talk about it. You talk about it in your article, The Inevitability of Anti-fandom.
Yeah.
And that was from January. And you're basically talking about trolls and haters. Yes. People who have negative attachments to celebrities.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? Give people a rundown.
Yeah, it's kind of like this intensity we see from the stands becomes reversed because you've put so much faith in this basket that as soon as it breaks and can't hold on to it, you realize everything that you've given up, or the time you've spent, and like how much you believed. Like, it's a crisis of faith, essentially. And that ends up with you rebelling and doing the reverse. Now I need people to know how bad this person is. Like, they need to understand that this is a bad person. If you go back to the days of Your Fave is Problematic, I mean, that was part of their mission, was, let people know that these people, there's issues with them, so that, everyone needs to be aware and know all the time. And I think that's also part to do with the perpetual present of, like, you need to have it top of mind, because otherwise your mind is going to wander away. Like, we're treating everyone like there are, mental hostages in a way. And you want to redirect the attention to, like, yeah, I hate this guy. You need to hate this guy too. And if you don't, I want to make you feel bad about liking him.
That's cancel culture.
I mean, sure, but it's bizarre because it doesn't even seem to have anything to do, like, you're saying, like, I'm canceling you because you are doing something that I don't like. Not even, it's not acceptable by societal standards. This is going against my own taste buds,
And then you try to pitch to other people your taste buds so that they agree to not like this person as well. Yeah. Even though this person is probably a human. We're all terribly flawed people. Yeah. Some more so than others.
Yes. And like, they might take it out in different ways. And I think too, the thing with anti-fandom is that I think sometimes they will sort of direct the rage at the fans because it's easier to get to fellow fans than it is to, get at Taylor Swift. They can rage on Twitter all day, but that's not going to do anything. It's not coming to her from you, from like, these are the moments when I think you really realize what a gulf there is between the fan and the artist. You're like, oh, they don't actually owe me anything. Wait, why did I feel like I was owed all of this stuff? And then you sort of have to re-examine, where you just went without thinking because it felt right and it felt exciting. And
their publicists put a lot of effort into making you think that.
Yes.
It didn't come from nowhere.
Yes.
I mean, these people, they know all the tricks of the trade to get you to feel like you're in the fan club. Do they still have fan clubs?
Yes. Yes.
So are the stands part of the fan club, or is that different?
Sometimes there are different groups usually. I will say I don't know if well, like the Elvis fan club in England had been running for like 50 plus years, and the guy was looking for someone to take over because he was like, I'm very old now, you know. And I don't think he found anyone because of the level of involvement that it takes. Like, I mean, this man has been doing this for decades, and that was basically a full-time job, and the only thing you're getting in return is, you know, an emotional fulfillment, as if it's a service that you're doing. So those people definitely fall into the stan category. And I believe as well that in South Korea, there's a massive infrastructure behind the way that they launch their artists, and include like set up fan clubs. And they even have, I'm not sure if I mentioned that in the post, but they even have, you know, encouraging notes to fans telling them to report to them people who hate their artists, so that they can take action, like legal action. And there's tons of accounts set up to sort of like find people who talk shit just randomly, like just someone's randomly saying something on Twitter and they're like, this person must be taken down and reported to. So it's organized as well, which I find terrifying.
Yeah. I wonder if that's even legal. I mean, it might be in Korea. It's not here, thank God.
I mean, is it illegal? I mean, I feel like that's why cults get away with so much. It's because there isn't really anything illegal about that type of malicious influence or coercive control or whatever it is you want to call it. That's why so many of them rely on becoming religions, right? Or being called, or saying like, this is just a religion, because that's when you can be shielded from anything. But it's, yeah, no, I don't think that it's illegal, really.
It depends how you go after them. If you try to get them kicked off Twitter, or if you try to get them fired or dox them, I think that's illegal.
Yeah, doxing is illegal. Yeah, for sure.
But if you're just trying to, if you're just trying to bully them on Twitter, I don't think there's necessarily a problem. I don't think that's illegal. I think you can just bully anyone you want on Twitter, except in the UK, then there's harassment laws.
Yes.
So in a lot of places in Europe, there's like a harassment laws. We don't have that in the United States because we have free speech. You're allowed to say Taylor Swift is horrible.
She cried in her documentary about people saying she was horrible. There was a comedian that had to apologize to her. And I'm like, that. This is entirely showing the point of how problematic this whole thing is, of like, why is a comedian who is a huge fan and does a joke about Taylor Swift on stage as part of her set, because she's such a fan that she is like, I need to make a joke about it because she's part of my life. And then Taylor Swift is like, I'm so sad that this comedian was mean about me in her set. And then she's like, oh my God, no, I'm the biggest fan. I'm sorry. Like, and you're like, okay, wow, we're really seeing everyone enacting their, you know, personal, I don't even know. Yeah, everything is just happening online. It's terrifying. And is it normal? No, but I think people think it should be normal.
I mean, it is kind of normal now. Everyone had something to say about Kiki and her boyfriend, Kiki Palmer and her boyfriend.
Oh, okay. See, without Twitter, I'm like,
it was just, it set off debates about what's acceptable for a baby daddy or husband to ask his wife to wear. And I wonder, because everybody had something to say, I wonder where the line ends of regular fan or people who just want in on the gossip and stan begins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of, I think, because a lot of it has to do with how much it would affect you if something happened. So, or like if something happened to shatter your vision of what was going on. So if you manage to just see them as imperfect people that are just doing a product that you're fine with, then I feel like you're probably just a fan. It's I don't know if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but the idolatry that is the real problem. And I think that's sort of where that line is blurred intentionally by those that want to make money off of the really intensely devoted people. But yeah, that's usually where, like, as soon as you start idolizing someone, you start dehumanizing them as well, right? Because they're not allowed to have, like, every little error becomes, you know, a cardinal sin. Like, you might not like all of your friends' boyfriends, but do you go around having tantrums about it? No.
Yeah, this kind of set off a debate because she wanted to wear something. She's had a baby and she got
Yeah.
her body back. So she wanted to wear something cute to the Usher concert. Her boyfriend said online it was too revealing. So there was kind of a debate of where does he get off saying this to her versus, well, that's her baby daddy. So he has every right to kind of make demands about how his wife or baby's mama presents herself.
Mhm.
So I think it was an excuse for people to debate, probably because there was something really important happening in the world. So we needed to focus on Kiki Palmer. They distract us. I'm so conspiratorial sometimes. When I saw that, I was like, what is really happening that they don't want us to see?
Oh, I mean, that's entirely possible that that's part of the equation. Like, it's hard to know. Um, but yeah, for sure they're distracting us with things, or like hitting up. Like, for me, the whole recent Taylor Swift drama, I'm like, this is a very well constructed publicity stunt that required basically like no participation. It was just going on its own. And I was like, we'll see. I'm like, I can see what's happening here. And then, you know, I get all these push notifications about the band, like, more MSG shows added, you know, oh my God, they're headlining these festivals. I'm like, yeah, what a shocker. You did it for the name recognition. And now it's paying off. So
Yeah, I can see how this Taylor Swift thing might be a broader debate on, do we judge somebody by who they date? You
yeah.
know, was what this person said that bad? I didn't look it up, so I can't really speak on it, but it could just be an excuse for people to talk.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, it was something from a podcast. I believe he apologized, but that's not enough. I think I have wondered about this, if part of our world has led us to just simplify people so much that it just has to be like, she should have been able to detect that he was a bad un, you know? Like, the fact that he that's all irrelevant. He apologized, like, whatever. Yeah, sure, you can think he's hot, but also you should have been able to sort of like perceive it with your superhuman abilities. I feel like there's something there where it's like, you should know. And there's always an awareness of, this looks bad. I see stans say that all the time. And that just means like, oh, other people are going to be angry. And that makes me stressed out because I don't want to see that reaction. And that's part of that attachment as well. Like, when something small like that starts to affect your well-being.
Now,
And it
do
can't.
stans with this problem attachments, do they have regular relationships? Like, are they happily married? Do they have lots of friends? Or does this dysfunctional attachments to celebrities bleed over into the rest of their lives?
I mean, it depends, because you only know what they tell you online. Lots of people have said, like, I think a lot of them are married, some are parents, and some are dating, but you know, I wouldn't know how good that relationship was, you know, because it's easy to just like, you know, keep the ruse going. I try never to take things too much at face value online, because there's been so many cases of completely made up personas, where you're like, okay, yeah. But I think it would be difficult to pay attention. I know that in the K-pop world, there were people being like, oh, my husband is so upset that I can't spend time with him, and all of that stuff. And you're like, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's taking up your brain energy.
it is. And well, I know that a lot of people we can't see by looking at them, but they're not having great relationships. They're not great in their relationships. You know what I mean? It's like, just because they seem normal, when you start to scratch away at the surface, you realize that they're not actually that great a husband or that great a wife. And maybe even their husband doesn't know until it's too late.
Yeah.
and maybe they'll have, you know, dysfunctional relationships with his parents, or, you know, it comes out later and they just overlook it. This is why I'm surprised anyone thought Taylor Swift would be able to identify a bad boyfriend. A lot of these people, they don't identify that their baby daddy is a bad boyfriend until after the kid is born. So how is she supposed to identify it within the first few months of dating? Most of us can't. Like,
no, I think that's what is part of the problem, is we've gotten so removed from the day-to-day moments of, I'm assuming if you start dating someone is because of the chemistry, like how you feel when you're with them in person and what the two of you are discussing together. You don't do a big thing of like, oh yeah, I can't even think, but like life is not a dating site where every potential, I don't even want to say red flag, because red flags are used for behavior mostly, or in my mind, but like all these topics that you're just like, oh no, this is giving you away as someone that I could never even have anything to do with, because once you're in front of them, like you're probably going to be, if you're feeling something, you're probably going to lean into it.
Yeah, especially when you start to get onto their opinions on certain topics, because once you scratch that away, most friends don't agree on anything, on everything. I mean,
yeah, no,
most best friends don't agree on everything. Spouses don't agree on everything. So if you're going to hold them to this obscenely high standard, that more so than you would hold your siblings or your spouse, and I don't know how anyone passes that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how it works. But I think it's also because you don't necessarily, you're not with the level of scrutiny that people are under, is so intense. I feel like we're all such F-ups. Like I would probably slip all the time and just be rude to people, or I'm trying to think of like things, but like you can't see what people are doing all the time when they're in your life. You're not following, or I didn't follow people I knew like on every single social media site just to be able to have the 360 view of their life. But you do that with celebrities, and it becomes impossible to sort of to not find something to have a problem with. Really.
Yeah, I'm surprised anyone has any fans. Now that you think about it, there's going to be something they do that will mess your perception up. And if they do nothing, then you know that this is just a whitewashed existence they're putting out. It's not real.
Yeah. But it is also like, it's that saying where people will remember how you make them feel, not necessarily, what you said, what you did or whatever. And that feeling people will hold on to. And sometimes it's good because it can help people get better. Like, oh, I know, like, I have no idea how intent Kevin Spacey is on his rehabilitation of being, a sex pest. But he had fans.
I love that term, sex pest. I love it. Totally stole it from the British. I love it.
Like it just feels very apt for a lot of people. But yeah, he had fans
not a
still
molester,
being like,
but they're close. Like you're just a sex pest.
Yeah.
But Kevin Spacey is totally a sex pest. That's a perfect term for him.
Yeah, no, exactly. And he had fans that were like, no, we're here to support him as he, works on improving himself. And we have faith that he can change. And it's like, this is not a situation where I think he necessarily is gathering any strength from that. But in general, if there's people still in that in your corner and believe in you, like that's redemption, right? Like we have to be able to redeem ourselves.
I mean, does he want to change?
Oh, I don't know about him. That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know about what's going on over there. I heard rumors about him since way before any of this came out.
He's totally like that.
Totally so I'm like, I don't know. Are we surprised? Like that has been me too sometimes when news comes out and I'm like, wait, did we not talk about this 10 years ago?
People just forget. They conveniently forget, like Bill Cosby. They forgot that it had all been dished out in the media.
Yes.
Way
in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they were like, oh my God, Bill Cosby's a pervert. Like everybody knew that.
I wonder if this has to do, because I've been trying to think of this thing that you're saying, like they do something and then you get angry. And I'm trying to think of like, how do you excuse things from the past? And I wonder if it's because if something has happened before you were around, you have no attachment to it. And because I'm thinking of, Well, as I was doing research, I read this paper on hockey fandom, and it was covering a particular player who had been confronted with rape accusations and how the fans reacted to that. And there was actually a very big backlash where they're like, I don't know if I can keep, following this guy that I think is possibly, potentially, probably, doing things like this. But what would happen is that a lot of people deleted everything. So the archives were gone. And next season, when new people come along, they don't know about this. They'll find out later on when it pops up in the papers in 5 years. So I feel like you form your attachment with what you know, and then everything that didn't impact that, you're sort of trying to you're like, yeah, but he feels bad. That's why the apologies never work. Like if you come around afterwards, you'll be like, well, he apologized. That's good. I like that. I like that. And that's enough for you. But if you were there in the moment with your rage and just sitting there shaking, being like, why is this happening? And you're like, that apology is not good enough. It creates these different forms of attachment. And then I wonder, did Bill Cosby get caught up with? Because the majority of people who were reacting, were reacting to something that was like not, like it was a sudden surprise. They weren't aware of any of it, and suddenly it just like came like an avalanche because there was a shift in perception, or like
that's probably true.
Yeah,
it's
like, is this making sense? As I say it, I try to work things out, and sometimes it doesn't make much sense, but I'm trying.
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't know about it and the accusations resurfaced,
yeah,
to a fresh group, or the original people just put the idea out of their head because maybe it was a different time when it was in the 90s. Because I know in the 70s, he was like, well, that's just what we did, no big deal. Maybe in the 90s, it was, okay, no big deal. And by the time it hit in 2013 or whenever it hit again, the society had changed so much that it absolutely was a big deal. And it should have been a big deal at the time as well.
Yeah. I'm trying, this is like one of the things I'm trying to understand, like how that impacts people. And I saw you doing a face when I said that's why apologies don't work. But I think that is to do with if you're apologizing to a crowd, like not individually to people that you've hurt, where you can understand where they're coming from and respond to that and actually have a connection. If you're responding to a crowd, every single person in that crowd has a different expectation. And anything from like, your enunciation, or which word, like, did you say 2 or 4, or did you not sign off the tweet correctly? Like some people are going to be like, that was perfect. And then maybe more people are like, no, I'm angry because this doesn't satisfy my very,
some people are not going to be satisfied.
No
matter what. They don't want the apology to work.
Yeah.
I mean, all we have is an apology, really.
Yeah.
Supposed to forgive people if they screw up, but I mean, we know that's not true. That's not how things really work. People don't forgive. They don't want to forgive. Even though they say they want the apology, they don't want it.
No.
And there are some people who do, because they want to forget about the incident and go back to watching the Cosby Show.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Okay, I have to ask you about this because we were talking about negative attachment, and we're still talking about it right now, I guess. In your paper, The Inevitability of Anti-fandom.
Yeah.
You talk about how this hate bond is stronger than a love bond. Do you really believe that? It's so cynical, and I know you might be right, but nevertheless, isn't it really cynical? I've seen it as well, so I'm not trying to like shade you or anything.
No, I don't know. I could only speculate, but I think also it's because there's some, I love poetry, and poetry often revels in that like rage, and you can just feel it, but you still sort of get it out of you once it's out there. So I don't know. I think the problem with the intense positive attachments is that euphoria will retroactively always seem like less than it was, but you can also retroactively make things seem worse. Like the bad times will be remembered even more, I feel like. Isn't this the whole thing with 10 people say something good and you're just like, okay, and then one person complains and you're just suddenly like, oh my god, what is happening? Like we are not very good at processing ups and downs, I guess.
Well, downs, because what do they say? This evolutionary biology way of thinking of it is that if you eat 10 times, good.
Yeah.
But if you get eaten once, then that's the end of you.
Yeah.
So we do weigh hate a lot more than we weigh love. And we've kind of outgrown that. Evolutionarily, we've outgrown that, because if you do allow yourself to get caught up in the negativity, it will actually ruin your life, even though it doesn't have to. But in your brain, you can't tell a difference between a real threat and a perceived threat online.
Yeah, I mean, that's partially what interests me so much as well, is like how real those threats can feel, and what does that mean for us, that we can have like entire something that I would call an interior life, but it is kind of playing out on this digital plane as we're, you know, walking around. And it's a bit like, yeah, it becomes like, yeah, I always try to think about how that affects us, to have these attachments that are not physical, and want that because it's easier and it's convenient, and
Certainly is easier, because being on the dating market, I've been off the dating market for 10 years, but I remember being on the dating market and like every little thing was such a big deal. You know, he didn't text me back, or, you know, he said this at dinner. What does that mean? You know, the smallest things were a big deal. And I feel, and maybe I'm not remembering it correctly, that kind of feeling was worse than anything from the online.
It's like, that is why I couldn't handle online dating as well. Like the way that the rejection can feel sometimes, and you're like, this is completely like, maybe I would meet this person and be like, oh my God, you're so boring, I don't care what you think about me. But just because you've somehow managed to fill in everything as like a potential, I don't know, 100% on everything, and they like took themselves out of the running, and you're just like, oh no. It's scary. Like, and I think too, especially with, I really, really believe in how we as humans interact with each other, like in the flesh. And like, I just feel like people's presence in person means so much more than when you're just swiping on something, or, you know, on your online profile of, OkCupid back in the day when there weren't apps. It was all just like desktop. Yeah, OkCupid, and what was that one? Plenty of Fish and all of that. Yeah.
The originals. Yeah, I've always preferred seeing people face to face. And rejection face to face, I think, is much worse than rejection on the online. But, you know, I'm not an expert in this, but meeting somebody and talking to them and being like, I put my best foot forward, and then still not getting, you know, asked out or whatever, or I'm still like leaving that text on read, you're like, oh wow, they completely rejected all of me.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just a profile. You totally met me and we're like, nah.
Yeah.
Ask in real life.
I have some terrible experiences in that sphere. That's a whole separate kettle of fish. For a different topic, perhaps.
Different topic. And honestly, doing you a favor. Anyone who rejects you is doing you a total favor, because they're getting out of the way so that the right person can come along.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting too is whenever I've read books about dating science and all of that stuff, it does seem to like consistently say that everyone has appeals to someone, basically.
Oh, yeah. A few people.
Yeah. Because there's like a weird group of people that kind of appeal to everyone, but then there's the outliers that will really appeal to other people. So as much as you feel rejected, like it's statistically speaking, yeah, you're flipping cookies for people.
There's someone out there for everyone. I say this all the time. You just need to find them. I mean, things have gotten a little weird recently.
Yeah, that's what makes it really hard. Yeah, it's just like our current climate, I feel like. But
you wrote a paper on Loveline like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
How does our current dating climate relate to Loveline? Was this the original?
Yes.
It was the original.
Yeah.
What years did it go for?
So like it started in the 80s. Yes, the 80s. And then it went on until 2016, I want to say, or maybe
Really?
2014 until it's some, yeah. Yeah, it
That's
went
a
on for
long
quite some
time.
time. Yeah. With Dr. Drew was the consistent, he was present for the whole run. So he did it for like 30 plus years. And it was really big when Adam Carolla was on it as well. And I just feel like a lot of the stuff that they talked about seemed to predate a lot of the troubles that we see now. Like they would run into people who were either hypersexual or sexually anorexic is the term for when you're just like kind of repulsed. But
That was
it's like,
asexual? Is that
no,
asexual
because
now?
asexual is an actual way that people will classify their non-attraction. But if you can still have had good experiences and then find yourself averse to sex, and that would be seen as like, well, what happened?
Hmm.
Because a lot of times that can have to do with your hormones, or I mean, this is part of what was interesting with Loveline, is that they would talk about antidepressants, and people would talk about how they had a low sex drive, and he'd be like, well, are you on anything like this or that? And they'd be like, yes. It's like, well, that's what's making it happen, that's what's bringing your drive down. And people wouldn't know, and they would just be like, oh wait, what, that's what's doing it? And he's like, there are alternatives, like go to your doctor and ask about this or that, because you shouldn't have to put up with that. Like you shouldn't have to choose between depression or sex. Like if your sex drive disappears or it gets numbed out, like there's various ways that happens. And I don't think we particularly know about that even to this day, really, the knowledge about that, of how just the birth control can affect you, and
Birth
how,
control. I was
yeah,
going to say
and
birth
yeah,
control. And people didn't even realize, and it never got brought up until
no,
I'm seeing it recently.
yes,
Um,
I know, yeah,
but like when did I go on? I think I went on with my first boyfriend or whatever. And they never told me any of that.
no,
The Planned Parent had never told me any of that.
no,
That it can affect your attraction to people. It can
yeah,
affect and it really matters which birth control you get on. There's like, oh, we'll switch your prescription because this was out, so we're going to give you this prescription. But they don't say, oh, this could be completely upend your life right now
yeah,
because we ran out of this.
yeah. Yeah, I remember it was like a disaster. I felt like it ruined. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? And I find it interesting too, whenever you hear from and there were a lot of guy guests on Loveline that would say like, oh yeah, my girlfriend, like she went insane when she was on the pill. And it's harder to see it for yourself, but it's interesting when people will notice it, because you can have like extreme mood swings. Um, that does affect us, as unfortunate as that is. Sometimes that you're just like, it's
Some more so than others. Some ladies, when they're
mhm,
in their cycle really affects them emotionally
mhm,
and how they respond to things. Some people, not so much. I don't consider myself a very emotional person, but I was listening the other day to this lady. I'll put it on the screen because I'll find it. And she was basically saying to this guy when you should approach your spouse about things, when you're going to get the best outcome. And on the one hand, I was like, that is incredibly sexist to say that women don't have control over their emotions and that they're, just swaying with their hormones. But on the other hand, I say, okay, well, some people probably do. There's probably a range, a scale, and some women are probably more so on the more affected by their hormones scale,
mhm.
not just
Yeah,
physically, but mentally as well.
yeah. I mean, that's part of it as well, of like, I think I get what you mean, that it can be, it's very sexist, but I think it can be useful if you look at it as like, try to recognize the patterns of like, oh, because there's probably signs already that someone is kind of like on edge. And then if you learn to recognize when she's on edge or he's on edge, then like, that if you approach them with something, it's not going to be like, kids learn how to do this with their parents, like, oh no, I'm not going to ask for a treat now because they're in a bad mood. So it's just about learning how to even differentiate. And like, it doesn't help to just be like, oh, it's just your hormones, because it doesn't solve anything.
No, it will start a lot.
Yeah.
People start a fight that way.
Yeah. But it's just
Probably
good to
should
be
bring
able
it
to
up.
sort of know, like I've traveled with people who sometimes will have moments, you know? Yeah. And you just gotta like, all right, I
You
know
have to
this is how
accept
you
them as,
react. Like,
yeah.
so I'm just gonna let you get through it. And I'm not gonna be like, you know, this is how you always get. Like, oh my God, you
Never.
like, you know, that's not helping. Like, oh wow, that's how you extend it by, you know, a few more hours.
You
You
make
just
it
have to
much
learn
worse.
how to, and I do find that a bit scary that people would have to ask that about like, oh, I don't know how to decipher what my, it's not about mind reading, it's about sort of, you know, just general disposition. I'm sure they would be able to figure it out at work, like when their boss is in a good mood or a bad mood.
That's true. Now back to Loveline though.
Yes, yes, it's
So
really one of my favorite topics.
why did they stop it? It seemed to be most needed in 2016.
I know. And Dr. Drew was saying that that was around the time that they really started to reach the Latino market in California. And he was like, that's a really big expanding market. And they're so hungry for answers. And it's like, it's so great. But because radio in general sort of started to die off and podcasts took over. And Dr. Drew is still podcasting and he still does a podcast with Adam Carolla and they still do stuff. It's just like Loveline as a brand belongs to XYZ. And they were the biggest when they were syndicated across the country. Like every single, you know, state, people would be listening at, you know, 10 p.m. until midnight. So it was massive. And then once it started to drop off because no more syndication, just new formats for radio, it sort of, you know, disappeared as with magazines, really, you know, they sort of slowly started to peter off. But yeah, like you need, I don't know where that information would be coming from now, really. Is Jordan
Splintered.
Peterson, I guess.
I do not like online dating gurus. I've only talked about it on Patreon because I don't want to become that person, but I
Yeah.
see a lot of these red pill online dating gurus, and they are the last people who should be giving anybody dating advice.
Yeah.
They're often not in marriages or in miserable marriages or in one-sided marriages. Or this one lady who I'm convinced is a troll, and I'm convinced she hates women, just pearly things.
Oh my God. Yes.
He makes me
yes.
so mad.
I feel like I've seen things where I'm like, oh my God, this person again.
Why are you in my feed? That's what I mean about the Twitter
Yes.
algorithm. Why are you even in my feed? I don't want to know anything about you.
Controversial. It gets you revved up. This is great. Engagement. Very good.
But her fans are men. A lot of her fans are men who just really are waiting for the time where they get to punish women.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they're in control, when they have this idea called the wall, that women are going to hit the wall, and then after the wall, when man, she's going to come running for me, then she's going to regret that she turned me down. Then she won't. She still won't. It's never going to happen.
It's also so like yeah, someone I follow on Substack just wrote about this today about how guys were trying to call Margot Robbie mid. They're like, oh, she's so mid. And she was talking about like, what is this about? Like, because it's clearly performative. Like Margot Robbie is, you know, gorgeous. Like she would never look at you twice anyway, whatever. Like, what is the purpose of being like, ugh, mid? Like, what's the purpose?
These pickup artists have this thing called negging, where they insult women and hope that will bring them down, bring their confidence down, so maybe they'll talk to them. Mm-hmm. Because they're messed up in the head.
Yeah.
There are two different types of men, at least two, but there are at least two. And there are men that are cool and they're in the game and they like women and they're just regular people. And then you have bitter men.
Yeah.
And there's a distinction, and then people don't, and I guess think women get jaded because they encounter so many bitter men that they think all men are like this, but there really is a distinction between the types of men that are out there. There are contenders and non-contenders. And if you're out here calling Margot Robbie mid, you're not a contender.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's kind of the thing where if someone asks you out just like randomly and you're just like, oh, I don't, this is whatever, like, no, thank you, goodbye. And then they lash out at you and they're like, oh, you're fat anyway, you know, like who would want you? It's like, what's just happening? Like, and that makes you start to mistrust every single person that like even approaches you, because you're like, I don't know if this is real or if it's a got you. And that also reminded me of when Carrie Mulligan was, you know, accused of not being pretty enough for her role in Promising Young Woman, where she doesn't even seduce men in it. The whole point is that men will pick her up because she pretends to be so wasted that she'll go home with anyone. Like, there's not even a purpose. Like, there's no point in there where it's like the men are so stunned by her beauty. It's like, you're telling me you think she's not attractive enough to get picked up as a, like, she's going, like, what are you talking about? Oh my God. What?
No, I think these are very vocal. I don't know if they're a minority. I hope they're a minority that just think these ways. I'm really hoping they're a minority. I know a lot of great dudes.
Yeah.
I'm doing this research. I'm doing the Calhoun rat studies.
Oh.
Have you heard about those?
Is it, well, I know about multiple rat studies, but I don't know if I know about this particular one. So
The
please.
rat paradise, where he made rat paradises and mouse paradises. He made many ideal mouse and rat universes over like 20 years. And he gave them everything they needed, but he found that the males sorted themselves into different types. And there were the dominant males who were keeping the harems and, you know, keeping everything together. And they were kind of jerks, but they weren't the worst. But there was another subgroup of males who got cut out of dominance, and they became very aggressive, and they became like filthy little rapists.
Yes.
And
that makes sense to me. And that is also why I know people find the word patriarchy to be super controversial, but I feel like to me, that's just one of the examples where the men will create their structure, and then the ones that are lesser, according to this made up structure, not even like lesser in reality, can only take it out on the women most of the time, you know?
They take
and
it
it's
out on
one
the
of the
women.
ways that they can, you know, feel like they have some sort of power.
Yeah, they do, because they have physical power over these women, and they have the power to neg them, insult them, bring them down. At least, you know, in humans, they have the power to, words do hurt.
Yeah.
And women can get very messed up in the head when someone's saying, oh, you're ugly all the time, especially when they're young. So
yeah. And when you're
it
told
does
that's your only value, like, that's what I find so fascinating, is just like the discussion seems to be so focused on these young women, like 30 and under. And it's like, do you think women older than that just disappear? Like, they still exist and contribute to society, even past their childbearing years. Like, they exist. Like, I'm not even saying like you have to find them attractive. It's like, you know, they're part of the ecosystem, because a lot of times they'll refer to women as like, oh, women, they always do this. And it's like, are you talking about the 1% of like the really hot influencers? Because that's not women. Like, that's a specific type.
I think they're so far away from all women that that's what they think about when they think about women. But really, it's like, you're so far away from literally every woman. Because I mean, and this is also, you know, my first job was as a cocktail waitress in a bar, and you really get to see a lot of people, and you really get to see how they interact. When these women who are past their mating years, so useless or whatever, if they're in the bar, they're still getting hit on.
Yeah.
There's still guys who they would consider that they would want to be like one day, like 50-year-old guys who have like a construction company, you know, make 6 figures a year, like, you know, maybe make 150 a year, still in good shape. And they think, oh, this guy wants to date a bunch of 23-year-olds. But really, when you look at him in the wild, he wants to date the 45-year-old woman because she's less of a headache. Like, he wants that. But I don't know what's going on with the red pill. They think, well, when I get to be 50 and I have all this money, you just wait then I'm going to date all these, you know, 20-year-old models or whatever, because they're going to come after me for my money. But when you see these guys who they think they're going to become one day, that's not how they act.
And I've seen them even like insulting these guys' wives. And I'm like, is it not good enough for them to be passionate, you know, about that person themselves? Like, why does it matter? that they're not beautiful enough to present, you know, power vibes to everyone else. I've thought
What
about
about
that
half of
because
Zuck's wife,
yeah.
Zuckerberg's wife, who I think is perfectly fine, and she literally just had a baby, so
Mhm.
leave her alone. And they were
Yeah.
doing that to her, saying she's not pretty enough.
Oh my God. Yeah, of course. Of course. Because that's the you know, now you're past your use. You had the baby. Okay. Go take care of it.
Well, what kind of men do these first off, this is why I think they're broken. There's something wrong with them, because they think that if they got the power, they would throw her away and start again.
Yeah.
But the actual men with the power are like, well, I have a life partner.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with her. What? I just don't understand. In their minds, they think that they fantasize about having this power, I think. And
Oh,
they
for
say, if I had
sure.
this power, I would be so much crueler with it.
Yeah. And I think there's also been and this is also something that you can like find reflected from old Loveline episodes, where it's just like they might want a woman that's aggressive, but when it happens, suddenly they're like, well, what's happening? They react poorly to it and suddenly get like, wait, what? Why are the rules suddenly shifted? And it's like, it doesn't actually have to mean anything, but suddenly it becomes like a weird hang up where it's like, that's what they thought they wanted. But in reality, suddenly they're like, what does it mean?
They're not contenders in reality. They've got to be on this online space. And I know this is why I'm like, I got to get off Twitter again, because I did get off Twitter for like a week and I was like, this is a great space. But then I needed the news, so I went back on. But Just Pearly Things was talking about, she had a poll, and she asked,
of course,
it was women or men. It's like, do you expect men in the top 15%, whatever that means, whatever this arbitrary top 15% of men means, do you actually expect them to be faithful to you? And I answered yes, like, of course. Of course I do. But most people had answered no. And these people who are living vicariously through GigaChat or whatever, they were like, no, the top 15% of man, he's not going to be faithful to a woman. It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
They're just regular people. First off, what does that mean? I don't even want to go into it.
I mean, the thing is too, they live in a world where no one has control over their base, you know, necessarily desires or even want to have control, because like someone who's gotten to be a CEO presumably is pretty good at sort of focusing in on certain tasks. And if he cheats, I don't think it's because like, of course he does. He's a CEO. It's you know, it has to do with other things, not like you got to take advantage of every single, you know, no.
Yeah. I mean, if he can keep his weight in order, which means he doesn't eat everything he wants, why would he not be able to control himself physically, like sexually? It doesn't make any sense. These people that they want to be like actually have more control than other people.
Yeah.
And actually get more value out of marriage, or more likely to be married in monogamous relationships.
Yeah.
So this is why I'm just like, I can't. I hope people don't even watch this late into the video, because I do not want to deal with Pearly Things whatsoever. But it comes up with my feed, and it just bothers me so much that, I mean, message is getting out.
I got a pretty bad one on Notes too, which was like the 4 horsemen graphic. You know, like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and it's like writers, and then there's like the last one that is supposed to be whatever, and they had filled in women's rights, and I'm like, in what universe? Like, you actually think that half the population need to be like actually officially subservient for things to be, you know, okay? And if it's not like that, it's marching towards the end times. I'm like, how
this is,
or have they just forgotten, you know, like, have they just forgotten everything that was in the past, and they're just like, God, I am so tired of all these these like thirst traps on Instagram, and they're stealing my money. Like, I don't even know what their complaints are.
I had to do research for this podcast I was on a few years ago. So I got into a men's rights thing about this bitter 45-year-old man. And he was just like, oh, date young girls because all the women are going to break your heart. Even these young girls are going to break your heart. And I felt like a fool, compelled to help these people because this person was just guiding them wrong.
Yeah.
And when I spoke up and I said, this is incorrect, you just have to be nice to girls. They want you to be nice to them. Just go work out and be nice to girls. That's all you have to do. Everyone jumped down my throat and they were like, you don't know anything about what girls want. I'm like, I'm literally a girl. I spent all my time talking to girls. I know all of this. And nobody wanted to actually get girls. They just wanted to beat up on them.
And I think those people might want to look at what their attachment type is, like truly, like, because that is part of the thing. When you find that you're consistently running into the same issues, whether that's you're attached to some girl and you're nice to her and, oh, nothing happens, and you do it over and over, there's probably something about the people you're picking out that are, you know, causing that reaction in you. And it's not that those other people aren't out there. It's just your radar is not pinging for them somehow, because you want to repeat those patterns subconsciously and fix them, but you can't fix them because that's how that works.
Is this like a mother issue? They have issues with their mother or their sister, or this is something that happened in grade school?
I would say it's usually your caregiver, right? Like parent, like it doesn't have to be parents, obviously, or like biological parents, but whoever your caregiver was, and like how it's because you learn how to regulate your emotions and how to respond and all of that. And if you're just like repeat, because you want a situation to be fixed is basically what ends up happening. And that's also why someone might end up with someone who cheats over and over again. Not because all men cheat, but because there's something. And like, I have a tendency to be attracted to unavailable people.
Oh no.
So I know it's not great, but I will know, I'll be like, oh, I'm interested in a person. And it doesn't even have to be like we had a 1 hour conversation. Like truly, somehow I will pick out the unavailable ones because somehow their lack of interest is so intriguing to me. I'm like, oh my God, who is this stranger who's turning away right now?
Someone said that recently. I forget which celebrity it was, but she said, as soon as a guy starts liking me, I lose interest.
Because that reciprocity suddenly causes like a shift in that structure. That's also why I wasn't sure if we were going to talk about AA today. So I was like, oh, I was thinking a lot about that as well. But that's also why there's a codependence group for that. Because oftentimes people who are in a relationship or have a family member who's an addict, the way that they're behaving is keeping the cycle going because they're enabling them, and they might start to react weirdly when that person starts to get better. They might have like a weird reaction because now they're behaving differently, even if it's for the better, and you have to learn how to cope with that yourself. So there's like co-treatment plans for the really involved people.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that is really interesting.
It's dynamics. You're treating entire family dynamics, really.
Especially with addiction.
Yes.
Because I mean, what they say, 2 crackheads can stay together forever, but as soon as one gets clean, that relationship is over.
But it's all part of that's psychology as well, right? Where this has come up on sober podcasts as well, where they're talking about in treatment, there's oftentimes like 2 people that will find each other and like have some crazy, relationship where they're like, and then their parents will be like, this is bad, you're in recovery, you're going to get dragged down again. But the more they say, like, we don't want you to date this person, the more this person becomes so interesting. And you don't even notice that you're doing it in response to like being told that it's not good, because you feel it. Like, it doesn't feel like a reaction. And then as soon as, if your parents are like, no, I love them, you might start to be like, oh, what's wrong with them? Like,
note to self, just be like, oh yeah, she's great. She's great. And then poison the relationship behind the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things where if people react strongly, then you're like, wait, what do you mean? Or like, oh, I don't like you doing that. I feel like it's just the thing that kids do. They'll be like, oh, why not? Let me find out. Oh, there's energy behind this. Like,
oh my God, what a pain in the ass. Some people really are a pain in the ass though. They like self-sabotage and you're like, stop doing this. But they keep doing, no matter what you say. There's nothing you can say. You can say. They're going to do it. They'll probably do it like, honestly, like 3 or 4 times before they realize,
It's
doing that
different
thing
at this
again.
time. Yeah. 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 Because we're so in the moment. I feel like, yeah. I feel like I could probably talk way more about Loveline, to be honest, but
Well, I'll ask you one last question about Loveline.
yeah.
I'll ask you one last question in general. If there is any advice from Loveline that you heard that you think everybody needs to hear, especially this next generation of kids coming up, what would that piece of advice be?
Oh, wow. I think, well, I would say that they should learn about the morning after pill and how conception actually works, because it's insane how many people think that it's an abortion pill, or that it is or that conception is instantaneous, because they'll think like, oh, it's happened, therefore if you take anything you're aborting a fetus. And it's like, no, that's not how these pills work, and they are the exact same mechanism as the birth control pill. And I just think, like, if you're actually against abortion, you should be supporting the morning after pill, because that would reduce abortions by at least 66%, because it has like, that's kind of what, like, the success rates basically.
Yeah, I learned this too because I was worried. I was like, oh no, I had some champagne, I've ruined the baby.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, the baby's not even in your bloodstream for 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah. No, there's like so many things, like and even I learned this from Loveline, that was like, oh, conception can take up to 3 days. Like, it's not necessarily like, oh no, it's like, some people are like, I knew when it happened. It's like, probably not.
Well, you can, and this is just for people at home, if you can tell a lot by your Apple phone. It'll tell you like when you're ovulating. So if you want to plan, you can plan by that. But no, it's bounce around, and then it'll like implant, and then it's happened.
Yeah, exactly. And just like, yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. It definitely made me realize that there's a lot of ignorance out there, and it scares me.
Well, who taught them? People didn't teach them. I had a really good health education, I feel, in middle school. I thought the health education I got, but it was in Rhode Island. Providence, Rhode Island, which is fairly liberal and progressive. I'm not saying everything they do is perfect, but for this, they did sit us down and teach us, this is how you don't get pregnant. This is seriously, don't get pregnant, but seriously, don't get pregnant. Here's how you do it. And I don't think a lot of people had that. They were just like, oh, don't have sex, which is not realistic for some people, especially people who have a boyfriend or a girlfriend at that age. When you're 16, 17, like, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, it's they underestimate the power of their hormones and the power of the moment, and like, oops, that's just happened. It's like, well, you were making out naked. What did you expect? It's like,
yeah. Like, oh, we only did it one time. Like, that's all it takes. That's all it takes.
Yeah, it's like, and I also feel like it really highlighted how there's such a wide difference. There's the people, like, there were the men who were like, oh, I'm infertile, and I've just been telling every woman I'm with that I'm infertile because I am. And they're like, oh, really? Did you have a test? It's like, no, but like, no one's gotten pregnant, so obviously I'm infertile. And it's like, oh my God, like, what are you talking about? And then you have the guy that is so scared of getting someone pregnant that they'll be like, she's on the birth control and we're using condoms, but I'm also making sure to come outside. They'll be like, something slipped in. Are we in danger? It's like, she's on birth control. They're like, yes. And you wear condoms? Yes. It's like, you're fine, buddy. You're fine. You're okay.
You're probably fine.
You can breathe. You can breathe. Like, they'll double up. Like, so you have either the people that are so casual and just like, meh, meh, and the ones that are just like super careful. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, it's only a few days a month. Yeah. There's only a few days a month that you could get pregnant off the bat. There's only a few days. And then, but also rhythm method. Don't trust rhythm method either.
No. And like, as they say, life finds a way. So like, you could even be entirely right on the rhythm method, but there's some very persistent sperm that are like, we can live for a week, not 3 days. Like, There's no way of knowing. And like there are cases of women who've gone pregnant after having their tubes tied or with their IUDs, because it's like, oh no, we found a way to make this work.
That sperm deserves it though. Like if he or she, if that sperm made it and waited out there, that sperm deserves a shot at life. I feel. Raise that baby.
Yeah, I mean, I know whenever those things happen, it's like, wow. But it seems to be a lot of times it's with people that are quite fertile. And it's like, it's wild how this varies so greatly amongst the population, like in general. But yeah.
Well, on that note, I know I've kept you an extra half hour. And it's super late over there because you're on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's not that bad. It's not bad. Yeah, it's always enjoyable. Although I feel like I'm like, did I make sense? Caught myself a lot of times being like, wait a minute. But I gotta hash
thought you
things
made
out.
sense.
Yeah,
I thought you were making a lot of sense.
That's good. Thank you. I'm glad the dots were connecting, because maybe it's the heat that's making me confused. And also we've been getting lots of wildfire smoke over here, which I've never heard of for California. So I guess I didn't know that smoke spread so much into the cities when there were wildfires. Basically.
Oh yeah, we get it all the time. You got to get an air purifier for your room.
It's wild. Yeah.
Do you have one?
No. It's okay for now, but yeah, there were a few days when you went out and you're like, oh, it's like a barbecue out here. You're like, oh.
And your hair smells like it. You'll smell your hair and be like, my hair smells like I was at a barbecue.
Yeah.
And sometimes like, not to be gross, but you'll blow your nose and it'll be like you smoking or something.
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty crazy once you start noticing the way that your particles are just like out there.
They're there and they're in you. You got to get that air purifier.
Yeah, I know. I've got a good furnace filter though, so that at least for now. But yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. My lonely off Twitter self.
You're better off Twitter, and I'm glad you can come on. You have a life now.
Yeah. That is something that one should say to everyone who gets off Twitter. It's just like, you have a life now.
You're free. Run free, Monia.
Thank you. I'll try. I'll send postcards. Yeah.
Anyway, it's nice talking to you. It's always nice talking to you.
Yes.